Welcome to the channel for the future caretakers of resurrected species. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keepers Association.
Oh, hello there. Welcome to the Paleo-Zoo-Keeper Association. My name is Austin. We all know a lot of famous dinosaurs, especially the big and the awesome, like T-Rex, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus. All the big bad dinosaurs. But there are some dinosaurs that do have some fame, but for different reasons. One of them, Rich, is Maiasaura, the good mother lizard. And the name pretty much explains it all. Maiasaura was basically the first dinosaur to provide us with evidence that dinosaurs did care for their young. And this was revolutionary upon this discovery, since it was thought that, like a lot of reptiles, dinosaurs would just leave their nests, leave their eggs to the elements, and hope for the best. Now, while there are some dinosaurs that did do that, Maiasaura was the first proof that dinosaurs did take care of their young like birds. But before we really get into how to raise Maiasaura chicks, let's look a little bit on the Maiasaura itself. Like mentioned before, Maiasaura means the good mother lizard. Maia is basically is the name of a figure in Greek mythology who was said to be a good mother. And Saura is in fact the feminine version of Saurus, which also means lizard. Maiasaura peeblesaurum was a species of hadrosaur or duck-billed dinosaur that is said to live in an area that will be the state of Montana and the Canadian province of Alberta in the Upper Cretaceous period from 86.3 to 70.6 million years ago. Maiasaura was large, attaining a maximum known length of 30 feet with a height of over 8 feet in the hips and a body mass of between 3 to 4.4 tons. Basically, close around the weight of an Asian elephant. Like any herbivorous dinosaur, Maiasaura was a herbivorous dinosaur, and while there is some debate over it, was both a browser and a grazer. We'll get more into their diet later in the video. We'll get more into Maiasaura's biology as we go out this video. Now, like I mentioned before, Maiasaura is said to be one of arguably the most important species of dinosaurs found in history, especially due that it's the first evidence to show that dinosaurs did care for their young like birds. This is all thanks to a site in Montana known as Egg Mountain, where over 50 individuals, from embryos to full-grown adults, nests, and so on, have been discovered there. Might not sound like much, but it's quite a bit for paleontologists. So much so that the life history of Maiasaura is perhaps the most detailed life history of any dinosaur known in history. And we will get through all this throughout the video. Now, let's see how you can take care of Maiasaura. Now, obviously, on raising Maiasaura, we have to be able to resurrect the Maiasaura. However, raising Maiasaura, or any ornithine dinosaur, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, this includes most of the herbivorous dinosaurs like Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Dryosaurus, and of course Maiasaura and other hadrosaur dinosaurs. Because the ornithians, despite the bird hip name, are actually as far from being related to birds as a dinosaur can get. But while they are very far away from being related to birds, they're more closely related to birds than they are to crocodiles. So if you were able to get DNA of Maiasaura, even then you are going to have some challenges. So you could be able to modify bird DNA with Maiasaura DNA to resurrect them, but it'll be much longer and much harder to do than resurrecting like a theropod dinosaur. So, and kind of funnily enough, we're more likely to get raptors and Tyrannosaurus rex before we were able to get any of those herbivorous dinosaurs. I mean, we might get sauropods, but even then they're pretty different. So, this is definitely going to be a challenge. When you finally have the Maiasaura DNA already, you would go for the same thing that I mentioned in my last Tyrannosaurus Rex video, as in making embryo chimeras of ostriches that can produce sperm and eggs of Maiasaura, and having these ostriches breed, whether by natural or artificial, and then you could be able to go on from there. Once these embryonic chimeras, ostriches, have successfully mated, the next step would need to be planned before the ostriches even successfully lay their eggs. Why? Because hadrosaur eggs are weird. Now, when Maiasaura lay their eggs, they're about the size of an ostrich egg and have hard shells. But that's where the similarities end. Maiasaura eggs are said to be more oval than ostrich's eggs. This would be an issue for the developing Maiasaura embryo. But there's even one difference. That one difference in this that would definitely be an issue. Compared to ostrich eggs, Maiasaura eggshells are comparatively thinner and are more porous than an ostrich egg. What this means is that more porous, it means that there's more like little holes in the eggshell that allow gas exchange. This sort of trait, having be more porous than that of than ostrich eggs, is basically indicative of an animal who lays their eggs in doesn't brood over them, but puts them in a nest full of decomposing vegetation for incubation. Now, this is very similar to crocodiles, and in fact, the fossil record, when we look at Maiasaura nests, definitely show that their nests are basically like bowl-shaped structures with vegetation on top of the eggs. So, this will definitely be quite different to the point that having them stay inside an ostrich egg might not be the best solution. All of this means that we can't have Maiasaura embryos incubating in the ostrich eggs. Instead, we would need to have the embryos taken out of the eggs and placed in an incubating cup. We've gone into the detail of this in my recent Tyrannosaurus video. However, there need to be modifications to this. Reasoning is that this model, the model that's described in my T-Rex video, is meant for bird eggs, and while Maiasaura eggs are hard-shelled like that of birds, the porous nature of the Maiasaura eggshells are similar to that of crocodilians, and that would mean that the Maiasaura embryo would need the exchange of gases for breathing. So there need to be some modifications to allow more gas exchanges to occur. On the side note, there is a possible alternate route that could be done. While still going with the embryonic ostriches, it could be possible to genetically modify a type of ostrich that can lay eggs that are very similar to that of Maiasaurus. Hard-shelled, yet very, very porous. But mind you, this will be considered a bit of a stretch with current technology. So, it's still something to think about. Now, when this is all successfully done, it'll take between 3 to 6 months of incubation for the embryos to grow and be ready to hatch or emerge. And After 3 years, 6 months of incubation, the Maiasaura chicks are ready to hatch. According to the fossil record, Maiasaura hatchlings are about 16 inches long, close to the similar size to this model right here. However, the physiology is a bit different. I mean, obviously, this is the model of a fully grown Maiasaura, but the hatchlings, they look different than this. They would not be mini versions of their adults, but instead they'll have bigger eyes, smaller heads, shorter snouts, and underdeveloped limbs. This basically traits that would make them seen as cute. This skeleton right here would give you a pretty good example of what they would look like when they're born. Like mentioned before, according to the fossil record, that Maiasaura chicks have underdeveloped limbs, which means they basically are underdeveloped until they're around a year of age, which means they won't leave the nest that often. And this means that Maiasaura chicks are considered altricial, or they're basically helpless at birth, any parental protection and care for an extended period of time, much like many infant birds and human babies. In a study on Maiasaura's life history, such good specimens have been found that an extensive population study has been done on the species, and is the most detailed of any species of dinosaur. It has been shown that 89.9% of Maiasauras born would die within the first year by predation and diseases. Predators can be avoided, and diseases would definitely be needed to look out for, but we'll get to that later in the video. So with all this in mind, when the first Maiasauras are born, they will definitely need to be hand-reared extensively. Now mind you, much of the stuff that I will mention here, I've also mentioned in my recent Tyrannosaurus video. So some of this might sound familiar to you if you've seen that movie beforehand. When raising Maiasaura, we would definitely want them to be able to see themselves as Maiasaura so that they could be able to breed successfully with each other. With this in mind, we will need to raise them with a puppet that represents or resembles an adult Maiasaura. This will keep them from imprinting with humans and see themselves as Maiasaura and not like some distorted form of human. Basically, that they won't seek humans for companionship and mates. This will definitely be important much later as well. Now, whether you're raising these Maiasaura with or without a puppet, you would definitely need to be able to feed them properly. This is not just for generic reasoning of keeping them alive. So it's just also known that Maiasaura grow very large very quickly, immensely so. Like mentioned earlier, when Maiasaura are born, they're around 16 or even 13 inches long, and they can weigh in at 1.5 pounds. But they can grow to up to 4.8 to 5 feet in length in 1 year, and they will both weigh over a ton and be close to 20 feet long when they reach sexual maturity at 3 years of age. And when they're skeletal mature at like around 8 years old, they'll reach a length of 3 feet in length and weigh in at 3 or 4 tons at most. So all this to say is that they grow very large very quickly, especially compared to elephants who only reach sexual maturity at 10 or 14 years of age, and reach skeletal maturity at late teens and early 20s in the case of females, or 30s to 40s in bull elephants. So yeah, definitely going to be one heck of a difference. So with that kind of growth rate, yeah, these animals are definitely going to need a good amount of plant material as they grow. And while they're not that closely related to birds compared to theropods, How we feed birds can be a good model about how we feed Maiasaura, not only for some of the physiological differences, but also Maiasaurus' growth rate is pretty similar to that of a bird's, so it could definitely be a good model to start with. When feeding baby birds, from sparrows to eagles or warblers like shown in this picture, they will need to be fed between 6 to 12% of their body weight. Well, 6 to 10% for the eagles, and 10 to 12% with like small birds like sparrows. And they'll often need to be fed multiple times a day. Chicks under a week old will need to be fed at least between 6 or 10 times a day, less as they grow. This would mean that for a 1.5 pound Maiasaura hatchling, it would need to be fed between 40.82 grams to 81.65 grams of food multiple times of the day. Of course, this amount will change as the Maiasaura gets older, and the amount of times a day it will be fed will change as well. While we definitely have somewhat of an idea of how much food to give a Maiasaura chick, what kind of food stuff should we give Maiasaura? What kind of food do we need to feed it? The fossil record tells us that Maiasaura are primarily herbivores, feasting on fibrous plants, wood, especially rotting wood, tree bark, leaves, branches, ferns, angiosperms, and possibly grasses. On the topic of grass, while grass has been around in the Cretaceous period, and there are some hadrosaurs that have been shown to eat grass, like Equijubus. I'll put the name down below. It might not have been a large part of the Maiasaurus diet, and will probably be just good as just like an occasional supplement rather than a main course. When using conifer needles, since we definitely know that Maiasaura ate these, it would be advisable to go for the fresh, bright green young tips of conifer trees when they grow about in the spring. This will also be a good indicator of when is a good time to let adult Maiasaura browse on trees in a large paddock or pen. Leafy green vegetables like lettuce and spinach can definitely be used to feed Maiasaura as well. Using ferns for a food source can be tricky due to several of them having toxins, and you wouldn't know which is okay for Maiasaura chicks and which are not. In this case, it would be advisable to have fiddlehead ferns as part of the Maiasaura chicks' diet. That would be a good start. With wood, it's most likely that hadrosaurs prefer rotting wood, especially if it has some fungi and even arthropods in it. We'll get to the arthropods part later. Tree bark, like with ungulates today, might be eaten only during times when resources are scarce, like during droughts. Probably the same thing for rotting wood as well. All the same, no matter what plant material you feed them, the growing Maiasauras would definitely need a diverse diet so they get all the vitamins and minerals that they need, such as calcium, phosphorus, vitamins A, D3, and B are essentially crucial for their development, especially for their fast growth. Pine needles are a good source of vitamins C, A, and also contain minerals like calcium, iron, and magnesium. Fiddlehead ferns are a good source of vitamins A and C with potassium, iron, and calcium. They also contain essential fatty acids, antitoxins, and dietary fiber. Leafy greens are rich sources of vitamins A, C, E, and K, as well as vitamins B. and various metals like iron, magnesium, potassium, and calcium. They also contain folate, fiber, and antioxidants. Antioxidants. One of the minerals that is essentially important for Maiasaura chicks is calcium, so they could be able to build up their bones and so forth. So they will definitely need a lot of calcium. This is often suggested by scientists on why they would eat arthropods in the rotting vegetation, in the rotting wood that they found, or because their exoskeletons are full of calcium and also a little bit of protein to be able to help out with that as well. To help supplement calcium into the Maiasaurus' diet, the baby Maiasaurus' diet, you could definitely include ground oyster shells, grounded egg cells, cuttlebone, and calcium-rich grit in the baby Maiasaurus' diet. But make certain that it's ground up to pretty much close to a powder, so that it'll be easier for the baby Maiasaurus' digestive tract to be able to digest it further and it'd be more easily absorbed. As mentioned earlier, hadrosaurs would eat rotten wood if there's a significant amount of fungi on it. With this in mind, then it would probably be a good idea to feed Maiasaura chicks mushrooms. Mushrooms are a good source of B vitamins, phosphorus, selenium, copper, potassium, and vitamin D, which is essentially important for bone growth, since without vitamin D, calcium could not be able to be absorbed into the body at all. But mind you, on a side note, mushrooms only get vitamin D if they are grown underneath UV lights, and most mushrooms in supermarkets were grown in dark environments, so definitely take this into consideration. Hay would be a practical food to include in the baby Maiasaurus' diet, especially since hay is going to be an essential part of their diet as they get older and when they're fully grown. Like mentioned earlier in the video, while grass would probably be an occasional supplementation to their diet, it wouldn't be a large part of it, so other types of hay would be preferable. One type of hay that is common enough that it could be used for Maiasaura is alfalfa hay, which is a good source of nutrients like protein, calcium, phosphorus, fiber, various metals like vitamins A, B, C, and K, and minerals like magnesium, iron, copper, and selenium. Though you might want to be a tad careful with alfalfa, since giving them too much would probably develop colic. A gradual introduction to alfalfa would definitely be necessary for the Maiasaura chick. Another type of hay that would be useful, but unfortunately is not that commonplace, but it's theoretically a decent source of food for Maiasaura, especially since its relatives were eaten by Maiasaura and other dinosaurs during its time, or at least by some of its relatives. Hemp hay. Hemp hay provides a high amount of protein, along with balanced omega fatty acids and natural antioxidants. Even different parts of the hemp, such as leaves, stem, and so forth, offer different nutritional values in just one plant. But due to regulations with hemp and marijuana, it would be more expensive. Although there are areas where industrial hemp grows wild in states like Oklahoma, Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. Now that we have a good idea on what to feed Maiasaura, this next question, while it might sound simple, is actually a good one. How do we feed them? From what we can tell from the fossil record, the Maiasaura chicks are fed by their parent or parents in their nest, much like perching birds do today. On an interesting note, it seemed that, like birds, Maiasaura's close relative, Edmontosaurus, has a crop, which is a thin-walled muscular pouch located in the base of the animal's esophagus. Since both the Maiasaura and Monosaurus are closely related, it stands to reason that Maiasaura had this as well. Birds often use their crops to be able to store food for later use, and, in one modern species, even use it to ruminate their food. But this and more on it is a topic for a Paleo-Zoo-Keeper rant video that I am making or have made, depending on when you see this video. With both this and what we know about the Maiasaura, I could definitely say that the parent or parents get the food, possibly process it, by that I mean chewing it up, store it in its crop, go to their infants, and then feed the infants with this processed food from the crop. Interestingly enough, though, while the Maiasaurus chicks are underdeveloped, their teeth do show that they are ready to process solid food. So while they could process solid food, they would still benefit from plant matter that's been pre-processed for them, especially right after they hatch. Now that we mentioned all this, let's think about how we would hand feed them. When they were born, it's probably best to have the plant materials processed, most likely in a blender, to make something like a smoothie of sorts. Once you get this little veggie smoothie all processed, or even get a Hadrosaur formula sort of thing processed, you'll get into a syringe and syringe feed the chick. Like feeding baby birds, the best way to make certain that the Maiasaura chick is full is to fill the crop and basically stop feeding them when their crop is full and distended. Make certain that the crop is empty before you feed the Maiasaura so you don't overfeed them. Tweezers could be used when feeding them more solid food. When using hand puppets to feed and raise the chicks, modify them or make the puppets where tweezers and or syringes can be used in them to feed the Maiasaura chicks. As the Maiasaura chicks grow, how you feed them and how much you will need to feed them will definitely change. When Maiasaura chicks reach up to a year in age, they would be around 5 feet long and will be able to walk out of the nest. After you're able to reach this point, you're able to hopefully bypass the 89.9% mortality rate that Maiasaura chicks would go within their first year, according to population studies done on the species. This mortality rate is said to be caused by both predation and disease. While for the most likely will keep the percentage will be better with predators taken out of the way, disease will still be an issue for young Maiasaura. There are several illness concerns that would be an issue for growing Maiasaura, especially in the first year. There are some illnesses that we do have proof that could be an issue for them, and there are also some that are mostly theoretical, but definitely possible. One disease that has been documented in the juvenile hadrosaurs in the fossil record is Langerhans cell histocytosis, or LCH for short. It is a rare disorder characterized by the abnormal accumulations of Langerhans cells, a type of immune cell. This would manifest as bone lesions, often causing pain, swelling, and bone fractures. Which are basically signs that have been found in hadrosaur fossils, especially in the tail. This disease even causes bone destruction and loss. It can also affect the organs of the body, but generally prefer bones. Diagnosis of the LCH in animals would often involve radiographic imagery to identify the bone lesions and a biopsy to confirm the presence of these cells. Treatments of this disease would generally depend on the location of the disease. Local treatments, such as surgical removal of bone tissue, may be used for single bone lesions. Systematic treatments such as chemotherapy or radiation therapy may be necessary for patients with multi-system disease or extensive bone lesions. Steroids can be used either alone or as a part of various treatments. Biosophosphates. Sorry, I'll put how it's spelled down below. Which help to reduce bone loss, may be considered for LSH patients with significant bone destruction. I'm pretty sure some of you who often watch my videos will say, like, what are the causes and what's the prevention? Well, here's the thing. Even if it's a disease that's known today, no one really knows what causes it, let alone how to prevent it. There have been some speculation that it could be because of the environment and mostly genetics, but the thing is, no one really knows what exactly causes LCH. So, same way we don't know what causes it in hadrosaurs. So, we definitely have to keep a lookout, and as soon as anyone discovers what is the cause of this disease and what can prevent it, it can definitely be included for Maiasaura and other hadrosaurs as well. Now, for another disease that has been documented in hadrosaurs, we've actually been able to find this in dino mummies, or basically fossils that have pretty much either preserved the tissue, basically falsifying them, like soft tissue, like skin and internal organs, or basically like or impressions, basically. But anyway, these famous dino mummies have shown us that hadrosaurs are susceptible to stomach worms, especially those that are known to burrow in the dinosaur's stomach. Today, such worms that Maiasaurs could face would include hookworms, whipworms, and so forth. These worms are often transmitted by contact with contaminated soil and unwashed fruits and vegetables. Along with avoiding contact with contaminated soil, washing the plants that would be the Maiasaurus' food before feeding them would definitely help the chicks. Mind you, this is just a preventative, and there could be a time where something will slip through the cracks. To help with this, deworming medications like ivermectin would be used in killing any worms that are already in the animals. Make certain that the dosage is right for the animal, for if it goes wrong, the worm's death rate will be so high that the gut will get clogged up and will cause a very painful colic. Speaking of which, one ailment that is not known in the fossil record, but it's definitely theoretically possible for Maiasaura to suffer from, especially the chicks, is colic. Colic in animals refers to abdominal pain, often associated with gastrointestinal issues. These issues would include a gas buildup, impactions, whether by food, sand, or dead gutworms, as I mentioned before, a twisting gut, or displacement. Symptom of this would include restlessness, rolling on their backs, loss of appetite, looking at or kicking their abdominal area, and there are other changes of behavior like being depressed. Treatments of this would include like a fluid treatment, since they're going to be very dehydrated at this point, and will help them loosen the stool. Pumping mineral oil water into the stomach, so that way it'll help soften up any impactions, or even surgery for the worst cases. And prevention would often include a proper deworming, access to fresh water, proper food intake, and maintain a clean environment, especially since consumption of moldy food can also cause colic as well. One form of disease that's rough for any young animal are respiratory diseases, and dinosaurs would be no exception. With dinosaurs, there's a little something interesting about the respiration system's differences between The Saurians, the lizard hip, and Ornithians, bird hip dinosaurs. Especially how different they are from each other. Saurians are the lizard hip dinosaurs, which basically includes the theropods, sauropods, have an air sac respiratory system pretty much like that of birds, and is pretty much said to be the most efficient form of respiration in most vertebrates. Basically, posterior air sacs would draw in fresh air on the first breath. The exhaling would push air into lungs for gas exchange. Second inhale would draw this air into the anterior sacs, and the second inhale would expel, basically breathe out stale air from these sacs and out and up the trachea and out of the mouth or nostrils. Ornithian or bird-hip dinosaurs, which include hadrosaurs like Maiasaura, ceratopsians like Triceratops, stegosaurs, ankylosaurs, pachycephalosaurs, and so on, they have more conventional respirations with a diaphragmatic analog attached to the hips, and flexing it would help draw in fresh air. In some ways pretty similar to our own respiration as well. This difference can make it that some diseases would affect one more than the other or less than the other. And there definitely are some respiratory elements that can definitely affect both sides. One such respiratory ailment that can definitely affect Maiasaura is aspergillosis. I hope I said that right. I'll put it down below. It's a fungal respiratory disease that can affect both birds and reptiles. In birds, it's often seen in like poultry and birds of prey. In reptiles, it can basically cause things like pneumonia and other respiratory issues. Symptoms in reptiles, which are by their respiration as the closest analog to Maiasaura, would include like a lot of nasal discharge, lethargy, and so forth. You could be able to diagnose the Maiasaura with this with radiographs, fecal samples, necropsies, and other sort of forms of tests. Treatments for it would be like medications, especially antifungal medications, but the results would vary and would be challenging. Best way to prevent this sort of ailment is basically involve proper sanitation, good hygiene, and minimizing exposure to dust and spores. When the Maiasaura chicks are walking about, they would most likely walk on their hind legs more often, and they will gradually start walking quadrupedal more often as they get older and heavier. And as they are able to walk around, this means that they could be able to come to food and be able to feed themselves. However, it would still be a good idea to be able to do syringe or tweezer feeding every now and then. And this is primarily because that whenever you need to give them like oral medication, especially if it's like dewormer or anything else, you could be able to use this caffeine to do so. Have them conditioned to be able to syringe feed on their own, so that way you could be able to administer the medication without much trouble. As they grow, feed them the two different types of hay that were mentioned earlier in the video, along with browse, preferring to edible vegetation like twigs, branches, shoots, and leaves, typically sourced from trees and shrubs, and browse silage, basically a food stuff that was made from a preservation method for feeding animals that are browsers by fermenting plant matter, primarily like deciduous leaves and such, over a period of time in anaerobic conditions. It would become a more practical way of feeding them, especially as they get older. Tree hay, a medieval technique of making feed that are harvested from branches and leaves from deciduous trees in full leaf, bundling them up, and then hanging them to dry for later use, can also be used to feed Maiasaura as well. As they grow, one of the things you might notice is that one gender of Maiasaura will become bigger than the other. When they reach maturity, one gender would roughly be 45% larger than the other one. But as this video is being made and posted, we are not certain on which gender is the bigger one. It could be that the males, so they can be able to fight each other for females, or the females, so they can have more energy and such for egg laying. Yeah, but if I had to guess, my money would be on that's the males that are bigger than the females. Primarily because that it seems that Maiasaura might be able to headbutt each other, and this is only the fossils do, but they have like these little horn doves that could be used for headbutting each other. Now, when I mean headbutting, I don't mean like in the going full speed and bashing each other like it's been theorized with Pachycephalosaurus. It's more like a push and shove kind of fighting, similar to like how polled or hornless domestic bulls, how they would fight each other. Along with this, it's also possible that Maiasaura would headbutt and shove each other as a form of play, along with interacting with enrichment items and other activities. Also, as the Maiasaura grow, they must be raised with friends, preferably members of the same or similar species, so they could be able to develop social skills and be enriched. Also, it gives them the idea of what they are, pretty much like how the hand puppet I mentioned earlier in the video. They must be raised in an enriching but safe environment. It is likely that they will not develop well in an isolated environment. By the time Maiasaura reaches around 3 or 4 years old, they would be weighing around 1.4 tons in weight and close to 20 feet in length. This is also around the time when they reach sexual maturity. They even reach sexual maturity as early as 2 years. Along with caloric intake, there are some behavioral changes that will need to be addressed as this goes. One of them would be that when they reach sexual maturity and the females get in the heat, the bulls would fight each other and it would get ugly, especially if there's not enough females in the group. To avoid this, you will need to separate the genders from each other when not breeding or planning on breeding. If it will work in the same way it would work for cattle and captive gorillas, you need to have the males together. If there are no fertile females with them, barren females would be alright, or that there are enough females for the males to go around. In domesticated cattle, for example, you need a maximum of between 25 to 30 fertile cows per bull. So with this in mind, know that the adolescent Maiasaura would get hurt in reckless situations, so be on guard with that. While they reach sexual maturity that young, they will still be growing and will reach skeletal maturity when they're around 8 years of age, and in a size pretty comparable to that of Asian elephants. Raising these famous dinosaurs with infancy will definitely not be an easy task. In fact, what I covered in this video would most likely be just scratching the surface. What I presented here would be a good start for raising these good mother lizards. Hey guys, if you got this far, thank you for watching the video. Sorry it was this late in the month. I was originally meant to have this come about in Mother's Day. I mean, should be for the good mother lizard. But a lot of things in my personal life have came up and really derailed things. So, but at least I was able to get it before the end of the month. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I definitely enjoyed it, and definitely I learned more about the dinosaurs than I initially thought about them, especially when it comes to their crop. Special thanks, first of all, to the artists here. Keenan Taylor and Tenderman have been able to do commissions for me, and their illustrations really help bring my videos to life. I also want to thank BattlingBeasts for giving me permission to use one of his illustrations for this video. I will give you the links to their pages, DeviantArt pages, down below. I want to thank you to my Patreons. Your support means a lot. If you wish to be able to be a paid member to support this project, yep, I'll put a link down on my Patreon page down below, and you can either be a paid or unpaid one. Every little bit helps. I want to thank my subscribers. If you haven't already, like, subscribe this video, and your subscription really helps me out. And also, I want to thank viewers like you. Thank you. If you haven't already, like, subscribe this, and share it with your friends, especially those who are interested in dinosaurs and of ancient life, and the possibility of resurrecting them and raising them in captivity. It will mean a lot to me. Next month's video will be on the exhibit of Anomalocaris. This will definitely be a challenge for me, but it'll be a challenge worth doing. And with that, I hope each and every one of you has a grand day. Adios!